The ability to trade is very much impacted by regional integration, and we're going to talk about this in this module. Regional integration then will feed on impacts into agriculture. We begin here with the World Trade Organization, and practically every member of the world is part of WTO. That is an organization that regulates trade and largely tries to make it freer across countries. WTO is a large organization with bureaucratic structure, and there's rounds of negotiations going on, and all of those are meant to liberalize trade across the world. In addition to the WTO, various areas in the world try for tighter integration. You can see here the degree to which those integration can be structured. We start with free trade agreements in the middle, and then we move out on the circle with the level of integration increasing as we move out. I am now going to describe each one of those areas, free trade all the way up to political union, and what they mean. Free trade area, here we have all barriers to the trade of goods and services among member countries removed. But members determine their own trade policy with regard to non-members. This is the most popular form of integration, and examples include the European Free Trade Association, which is between Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland, and the one probably most Americans are more familiar with is NAFTA, and that's between U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And NAFTA largely takes away all barriers to trade between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. Second one is custom union, and this eliminates trade barriers between member countries and also adopts a common trade policy with other countries. So, these countries that typically enter into these desire further integration in the future, and they're presenting a united front to the rest of the world. One of those examples includes the Andean Pact, which includes Bolivia, Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia. Third, common market. Now we have no barriers to trade, and we have a common external trade policy, and we have free movement of factors of production between the members of the common market. Those factors of production would include labor, so labor has to be able to move across borders, and money, so funds can move across borders easily as well. This can be difficult to achieve, and if you think about it, it requires a great deal of harmony in policies across the countries, because particularly with money or capital, tax policies, for example, have to be roughly equivalent across the policies. Otherwise, we will see money, funds, capital moved to the country with the most lenient, if you will, tax policy. All right, we're now moving up to an economic union. And now note the item in red, which is the addition to the economic market. Here we have harmonization of members' countries' tax rates and common monetary and fiscal policy. A prime example of that is the European Union. The EU has the euro, which many of the members are part of, Britain being an exception. So they have common monetary policy and limits on what their fiscal policy can do. As you could see, that would require a significant amount of giving up of national sovereignty to be part of that European Union. The final level of integration is political union, United States being the prime example. States at our founding were almost thought of as independent nations. They came together, formed a political union, and have a centralized government. So, states within the United States are a political union. Barriers of moving goods across the lines of states are non existent. So, why do we seek integration? What's the economic case for integration? It allows goods and services to flow freely across boundaries. Doing so allows us to form more trade flows, which in general will allow for specialization and efficiency gains. We do that often outside of the WTO because it's easier to get countries within a region to agree to a principle rather than the entire world, which is generally part of the WTO. What is the political case? By linking countries together, there's less likelihood of violent conflict between the two countries, and the linked countries generally have more clout than one individual. So, if you're looking at South America, as those countries come together and form a larger bloc, have a common policy to those countries that are not inside that bloc, that will have more clout than one individual country. What are the impediments to integration? There are three major ones. First, it can be costly, and here's the issue. A whole nation or the group of nations generally benefit from free trade, more regional free trade, but certain groups may lose. In the United States, that is often workers. Number two, it can result in a significant loss of national sovereignty. That issue has come up in the European Union, and in particular as Great Britain looks to leave the European Union. Number three is that it often requires the free movement of people across borders. So we have to have often open borders for particularly individual countries within the European or the Economic Union. Those can be controversial, as you can see here in the United States. There are several also critiques of globalization or regional of integration. First is that poor countries often face disadvantages, and if you're a rich country, you may think that you gain more. Outsourcing will often weaken labor unions, and there's always the concern about exploitation of child labor. Those often come up as anti-globalization, anti-capitalist, global justice, or the Occupy movement, and the anti-consumerism. If you want to see some of the thoughts on that, I would suggest you look at a Wikipedia article called Globalization. Why does this matter to agriculture? And there are essentially three reasons why regional integration matters, or there's a lot of reasons, but three come to mind immediately. And let me just give you an example. First, EU is a major trading partner of the U.S. So if you're in the U.S., you're concerned about the EU and what happens as a result of Brexit. What happens as Britain, England, leaves the Union? Are we going to, and presumably then dissolves its relationship with the EU? We would have to develop new agreements with Great Britain. What will that mean? What will that mean for investment as multinational companies invest in Great Britain and, for that matter, European Union countries. A second example is the euro. Much of the European Union, with the exception of Great Britain, has a common currency called the euro, and that's shared by many EU countries. However, they don't have the same fiscal policy, and Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal have run up sizable debts. Often, those countries have trouble meeting those debt obligations, Greece in particular, and eventually this may, not meeting its debt obligations, require other countries within the EU to subsidize Greece, reduce the terms of the debt, or cause Greece to go out of the EU. Making investments in those countries, Greece, Italy, Spain, and Portugal, may face difficulties in the future. A third area is labor. Much of agriculture inside and outside the United States relies on cheap labor to harvest and process commodities. Those in the United States require migration or across borders. And what happens if that ceases? How do we meet our labor requirements within agriculture? Those are three quick examples of regionalization and what it means. This issue will again come up later in the semester.